Oh my god!
You ever meet one of those guys who's just too heroic? Yeah, that's Mason. Even as a kid, he was the type who'd throw himself into a school fight. Not to win, but because he couldn't stand watching people get bullied. That's just who he was. Fast forward a few years and surprise, surprise, he joins the military. Because what else do you do when you've got a savior complex and zero interest in office work? He trains hard, gets ripped, and somehow lands a job in the Special Forces. His first big mission? Take out a dictator, Juan Venegas. Tiny country, huge ego, classic villain starter pack. The mission? It goes down faster than a bad Tinder date. Helicopter gets lit up like it's 4th of July. And Mason? Yeah, he's the only one who walks away from that flaming mess. So what does a broken war hero do after surviving all that? He becomes a lawyer. Yep, from guns to paperwork. Now Mason's rocking a stiff back, a mortgage, and the quiet desperation of a man who peaked in his 20s. He's got a wife, a kid, and a bulletproof routine that screams suburban stability.
Like hitting him in the penis.
One morning, after the usual dad duties and soul-crushing legal grind, his past shows up in the form of an old army buddy, Sebastian. You know the type. Still jacked, too much cologne, and definitely about to ask for a favor. He says it's just a friendly visit. Yeah, sure, Seb. Because nothing screams casual catch-up like driving across town to see a guy you haven't texted in 5 years. Sebastian's like, hey bro, come check out my new business. Turns out the guy's running a full-blown private security firm now. Fancy clients, big contracts. Basically, he's turned war into freelance gigs, Uber for mercenaries. But he didn't come to show off. He came with a job offer. One job, a high-paying, high-risk, zero-thank-you kind of job. Bodyguard duty for a journalist. And not just any journalist, Claire. Big-time, headline-grabbing, Pulitzer bait Claire. She's headed to meet someone very special. Someone who used to be Mason's literal kill target. Yep, Juan. Freaking Venegas. Mason's like, absolutely not. No way, not happening. I mean, the guy did kill all his friends, kinda ruins the vibe. But then
20 grand says you are.
Sebastian drops the number, $20,000. Cue Mason's brain doing financial gymnastics, diapers, mortgage, that weird noise the car's been making. Suddenly, absolutely not turns into, how soon do we leave? Back home, Mason tries to pitch the idea to his wife. You know, the whole, hey honey, I'm leaving town for a few days to bodyguard a journalist in a country where I almost died. Shockingly, she's not thrilled. But Mason works his charm, which, let's be honest, is mostly guilt and deadpan silence. And yeah, she finally lets him go. Enter Claire, journalist, famous, fearless. Kind of a big deal in the States. And somehow, one of the only people on the planet who's been granted an interview with Juan Venegas himself. You know, the guy who's usually more shoot on sight than sit down for a chat. The moment they touch down in Paldonia, guess who shows up to greet them? Yep, El Presidente himself. And turns out, he's not doing it for diplomacy. Nope. Dude's a fan. Apparently, Venegas has a bit of a celebrity crush on Claire and just wants a selfie for his socials.
Take a selfie.
You approve?
Great.
My followers are gonna love.
But once they're in the same car, Mason starts to notice something weird. Venegas? He's not what Mason expected. Yeah, the guy's eccentric, more like a retired rock star than a ruthless dictator. But he's not evil, just kind of annoying. And then comes the real test of patience, a 3-hour drive into the countryside.
My people.
Venegas is chilling in the back, sipping wine with Claire like they're on a date, while Mason, thirsty, sweaty, and invisible, gets absolutely nothing. No water, no acknowledgement, no dignity.
I like it.
Boom. One of the escort vehicles explodes. It's a full-on ambush. Suddenly, bullets start flying. Soldiers are dropping. Everything's gone to hell. Again. And Mason, he's back in the driver's seat of chaos. Literally. And this is what he does. Mason's running on adrenaline and probably a pulled muscle or 3. His back's still wrecked from that last Warzone vacation, but he powers through, because quitting isn't really an option when you've got a dictator and a journalist in your back seat. He grabs a sniper rifle, because of course there's one handy, and leads the escape straight into the jungle.
A really big gun.
Now stuck in the middle of nowhere, Mason calls Sebastian to send backup. Helicopter, guns, prayers, anything.
So much for a milk run.
Meanwhile, Venegas casually borrows the sat phone and dials his nephew, Jorge. Sounds sweet, right? Yeah, until you realize Jorge is the snake who just tried to have his uncle killed. Apparently, Jorge teamed up with the local general and some sketchy international investors to stage a coup and take over the country, because nothing says family values like overthrowing your uncle with hired mercenaries. The general, by the way, is not happy. He screams at Jorge like it's a military soap opera, because their ambush, total failure. Instead of heading to the capital like a normal person, Mason decides to take Claire straight to the pickup point. You know, get her out. Let Venegas hitchhike home or whatever. They reach the clearing. A chopper shows up. But, surprise! It's not a rescue team. It's 2 mercenaries with bad attitudes and better guns.
Run! Run!
They're not here to help. They're here to clean up the mess. Mason pulls Claire to cover, eyes scanning for the next move. Shots are fired. Adrenaline spikes. He spots the chopper hovering above. And like every tired action hero before him, he takes the shot. Boom, helicopter down. Just another Tuesday. But of course, we're not done yet. 2 more gunmen show up, chasing Mason and Claire through the jungle like it's some kind of deadly safari tour. Mason's out of breath, out of options, and just when it looks like it's game over,
Where is Venegas?
boom! Guess who shows up? President Juan freaking Venegas. Because apparently, retirement isn't his thing.
I'm so sorry for the mess that I have made.
Meanwhile, somewhere else in this dictatorship telenovela, we meet the real puppet master, Colonel John, former Russian military, current aspiring Bond villain. He's the money, the guns, and the reason this whole country's about to explode. Why? Because he wants the mines. And to get them, he's helping Jorge stage a coup so he can put a friendly idiot in power and strip mine the country into dust. Yeah, he's not exactly big on loyalty. After barely surviving gunfire, explosions, and whatever that last ambush was, Mason, Claire, and Venegas end up in a quiet village, Venegas' hometown. The vibe way too wholesome for a war movie. The village chief walks out, smiles wide, arms open, and gives Claire a warm, welcome hug, like she's his long-lost daughter. No one hugs Mason, of course. This is a small village, peaceful, humble, and full of traditions. One of those traditions, bathrooms, don't have doors. Yeah. You heard that right. Apparently, privacy is a foreign concept here, just pure communal vulnerability. And Mason, he finds out the hard way.
Oh my god.
Anyway, they settle in. And Claire, she wastes no time. The camera, podcast mode, engaged. Mason becomes the cameraman, unpaid naturally. And for the first time, we see a different side of Juan Venegas. Not the warlord, not the dictator, but a guy who genuinely loves his people, loves his country, and has been risking everything to keep foreign hands off their natural resources. Turns out being labeled a tyrant is easier than fighting corporations with private armies. And for once, Mason actually listens. That night, Mason, being the poster boy of professionalism, prepares to sleep on the couch because, God forbid, he shares a bed with a hot woman who's clearly into him. Claire notices, of course, so she turns it into a game. Classic move. If Mason guesses her tattoo correctly, they switch beds.
That's a mandala.
And boom, Mason short circuits. Eyes everywhere but the tattoo. He takes a stab and says it's tribal. Claire's like, nice try. and then casually reveals another one.
This.
Yep, man's soul just left the chat. The tattoo reads, Alice propri volat, some fancy Latin for, I do whatever the hell I want. And somehow, Mason nails the translation. Then Claire shows off another tattoo on her neck. She explains it was from her wild teen phase. You know, when being a little chaotic was a personality trait. Since he guessed them all, Mason technically wins the bet. But Claire's not done. She leans in with that one more game energy. And Mason says no, because of course he does. Guy's guarding her like a pro, but also guarding his own pants like it's national security. So yeah, back to the couch. Next morning, Claire's not satisfied. She's like, yeah, the interview was cool, but I need something more real. Mason's ready to pack up and leave, but Venegas? Oh, he's got ideas. He tells them, if you want the full truth, come with me to the Capitol. Because apparently nothing says truth like driving back into a war zone where everyone wants you dead. And somehow, Mason agrees. Just when things seem like they're finally lining up, Sebastian calls. He's got a new client. Bigger money, much darker agenda. Guess who? Jorge and the General. Yeah, the same guys behind all the chaos, now offering a fat paycheck to have Venegas killed. 20 grand was just the appetizer. Now they're throwing real money around. Big enough to buy silence. Or guilt. Mason stares at the phone. Then at his gun. Then at Venegas.
Position, right?
Hey, we're heading for the border.
He walks over, hand on the trigger, and just keeps walking, because despite everything, some part of him still gives a damn. Enter Colonel John. Storms into the village like he owns the place. And slaps the village chief across the face like we've time-traveled back to medieval Russia. Venegas sees his friend getting assaulted, and yeah, he steps in to help. But Mason knows the truth. This guy isn't just anyone, he's the president. His life actually matters to this country. So Mason does what Mason does. He grabs a horse, throws Venegas on it, and rides like hell. They're barely out of reach when Claire falls off her horse. Just like that, Colonel John's men capture her. Mason and Venegas can't stop. They push on, headed straight for the capital to beg for reinforcements. Along the way, something shifts. They talk. Really talk. And that's when Mason learns the truth. Venegas wasn't the one behind the ambush all those years ago. It was the rebels. The betrayal, the blood, the scars. It wasn't Venegas. And in that moment, Mason sees him differently. Not as a target, not as a job, but as a man worth protecting.
Here for the night, and then.
They reach the capital and hide in an old church, the last quiet place left in a country falling apart. Mason pulls out his phone, calls Sebastian, and for the first time he pleads not for backup, but for mercy.
Dude, we need to talk.
He tells him who Venegas really is. Not a tyrant, not a war criminal, just a man fighting for his homeland. And yeah, maybe he's not perfect, but compared to the monsters chasing him, he's the only one still worth saving. The next morning, Venegas has a plan, and like most of his plans, it's noble, reckless, and borderline suicidal. He calls up an old friend, Sammy, protest leader, crowd whisperer, and somehow still willing to answer Venegas's calls. The deal? Venegas is offering himself, his actual presidential self, in exchange for Claire.
Just a petite favor, my friend.
Mason doesn't waste a second. He's already at the exchange point. And here comes Colonel John, rolling in with his goons like it's a business meeting with guns. They stare each other down, guns drawn, no one blinking. But once Claire's dragged out, with weapons aimed at her head, Mason knows he's stuck. He can't shoot, he can't move.
Okay.
Then Venegas appears, not alone. He shows up with hundreds of protesters, all rallied by Sammy. It's loud, it's messy, and it's enough to completely throw off Colonel John's squad. In all the confusion, no one even notices Claire and Venegas disappear. Venegas leads them into a secret tunnel, one that goes straight into the presidential palace. Emergency only. Guest today qualifies. They reach his private office, and surprise, Jorge is already there, taking selfies, probably rehearsing his inauguration speech.
No. Okay, it's okay. My American friends.
But Venegas, he doesn't yell, doesn't threaten, he forgives. Because deep down, he still sees Jorge as a dumb kid manipulated by power and promises. Too bad peace doesn't last. The general barges in. Jorge takes a hit. Venegas goes down too, but the vest saves him. Jorge isn't so lucky. He dies in his uncle's arms, bloody, broken, and finally realizing he backed the wrong side. Suddenly, the National Army arrives, and not to save Venegas. They're here to arrest him. Traitor, enemy, public threat. But Venegas doesn't run. He speaks. He delivers a speech so fiery, so raw, you'd almost forget he was just shot at 20 minutes ago. He tells them the truth. He's not trying to seize power. He's trying to protect the country from the ones who already sold it out. The soldiers hesitate, and then start siding with him. Right on cue, Colonel John crashes the moment. Guns blazing, men charging in. All hell breaks loose. Venegas grabs Mason and Claire, drags them into a secure room. Emergency bunker style, they finally get a moment to breathe. Then the lights go out, because of course they do. They've got no choice. They open the door and step back into hell. Mason dives as a grenade rolls in, barely escaping a free ride to the afterlife. He goes hand-to-hand with Colonel John, no guns, just fists, knives, and hate. They crash down the stairs. John almost ends it, knife raised. Claire comes in like a silent MVP and drops him cold. They make it outside, only to see the National Army on the verge of collapse. They're outnumbered, outgunned, losing. Mason grabs a rifle. He doesn't hesitate. Just when it looks like the National Army might lose, Sebastian shows up. Not with excuses, not with speeches, with guns, big ones, and a private security team that actually knows what they're doing. In minutes, Colonel John's army gets pushed back. Wiped out, scattered, done. The war's over, but the real impact, that comes a few days later. Claire posts everything, all the footage, every explosion, every truth. The world watches, and suddenly Paldonia is no longer just a place on a map, it's a headline. Turns out half the chaos was funded by private companies trying to steal the country's natural resources. And Venegas? He doesn't cling to power. He steps down, gives a press conference, tells the world goodbye. Meanwhile, Mason's back home. No drama, no bullets, just a front door, a warm hug, and a daughter who still thinks he's cooler than Spider-Man. Then one morning, while taking his kid to school, his phone buzzes. Text from Venegas. Thanks for everything. Attached, $5 million? Yeah, not bad for a freelance job. So, what does Mason do? He looks at his wife, his kid, and says the one thing every tired man dreams of saying. Let's go on vacation. So what's the lesson here? Don't trust private armies, don't underestimate retired presidents, and never go on a simple escort mission. It's never simple. Mason didn't ask to be a hero, he just wanted a quiet life. Instead, he got bullets, betrayal, and $5 million. Could be worse. If this chaos entertained you even a little bit, like, comment, subscribe, or just scream, "Max is my president" in the comments. Whatever works. Now excuse me while I check my ATM, just in case someone felt generous.